Days because Wednesday is Erev Yom Kippur. So I thought I would talk about a certain aspect of the Yom Kippur service that for many people, particularly Talmidei Chachamim, is the most interesting and exciting and vivid. And for other people, they get bored to the gills because they don't really bother to understand it. And that's the Seder Avoda, the Avoda of Yom Kippur, which is in Musaf. But first I have to tell you a little cute story. When my son was in second grade, many years ago, so he came home Erev Shabbos Teshuva. And we asked him if he had homework, over the weekend, whatever it would be. So he said, nah, easy assignment. Teacher just said do Teshuva. So I was thinking, for him it was talking maybe easy. What did he have to do Teshuva for? He was a katan. But Lamaisa, doing Teshuva is not an easy thing at all. And I mentioned on Shabbos that according to Rabbeinu Yonah, there's, in addition to the general mitzvah of Teshuva, there's a special chiyuv. See, it's interesting. Of course, I want to do Teshuva on Yom Kippur, otherwise I don't get forgiveness. That's obvious. But Rabbeinu Yonah says it's more than simply wanting to do Teshuva so I'll get forgiveness, although that's enough of a reason. Rabbeinu Yonah says there's actually a chiyuv to do Teshuva either on Yom Kippur or maybe to enter Yom Kippur in a state of Teshuva. That's the meaning of the pasuk, Lifnei Hashem Titaru. In the presence of God, you must purify yourself. It's not simply the statement that Hashem will purify you, but you're mechuyev, right? So there's a mitzvah d'oraisa to do Teshuva on Yom Kippur, and that's not easy. We say so many viduyim, but you always have to remember that Teshuva is ultimately a joyous experience. Yeah, I have to have charata, I have to have regret, I have to have remorse. But the message of Teshuva is I can change, I can be better. What I am in the past doesn't have to be what I am today, and what I am today doesn't limit me to the future. One can have a tremendous simcha in the Avoda Teshuva that you can fix it. No matter how broken it is, there's a tikkun. So it's an important point because I seem to, it seems like 2/3 of the frum world, maybe more, seem to be so depressed, zebrachen, anxious, sad, crazy, compulsive in this time of year. And as we approach Yom Kippur, it tends to go with a crescendo of that. So I tell my wife, so I got to deal with my nervous breakdown and everyone else's nervous breakdown. It's a little difficult. My own nervous breakdown is hard enough, but everyone else has one too. But I think the way that you get out of this is to recognize the great opportunities and gifts and the love that Hashem is showing us by the capacity of Teshuva. Think about it in a very simple way. Let's imagine that you have a very dirty garage or a dirty attic or a filthy basement or a filthy house. So you got to be Isaac with schmutz and dirt and filth. But every single step of the way, you're making it a more beautiful place. Yeah, so Hashamnu, I did this, and I did that, and I did that, and I did that. People say they get depressed. Somebody said they can't read Tfilah Saka before Kol Nidre because they feel like they're the worst person in the world. But look at it this way. You're cleaning the basement, or you're cleaning your house. You're cleaning your Beis HaMikdash, you're a Mishkan of Hashem. Right? So every shovelful of schmutz that I take out, I'm making it more beautiful. And that's why there was the minhag in Berlin, Rav Soloveitchik writes. It's not the minhag in Frankfurt. So in the Yeki shul in Washington Heights, I'm not supposed to say Yeki, okay. In the German shul in Washington Heights, they do not do this. But in the minhag of Berlin, when they say the Al-Chet, not just the Hashamnu, even we sing the Hashamnu, but they actually have a nigun, a jaunty nigun for the Al-Chet. And you might wonder, what's the sense of Al-Chet? What are you singing? The answer is because I'm cleaning myself out. Gewaltic, tremendous thing, right? So these are things to think about. And that's why the Mishnah says, quite openly, that Yom Kippur, together with the 15th of Av, for a different reason, was the happiest day of the year. Happiest day of the year. The Gemara as a whole, Arichos, what's so great about the 15th of Av? But for Yom Kippur, the Gemara says, Pashut. Yom Slicha Mechila, Day of Forgiveness. The Gemara doesn't even have to elaborate on it. It's obvious that Yom Kippur is the happiest day of the year. It's Pshita. Okay, but now I want to talk about the Seder Avodah. We have a Musaf, of course. In every Musaf, even Musaf Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, we briefly mention the korbanos that are brought on the Chag. But Yom Kippur, in the Chazaras Hashatz, not in the silence, we have a long recitation of all of the aspects of the Avodah of the Cohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. Now, what's interesting is we have a whole Maseches of Mishnah and Gemara, Maseches Yuma. It's 8 prakim, and you would be very surprised. You'd figure I'd have a whole Masech on the laws of Yom Kippur. No, the laws of Yom Kippur as a fast day are the last parak of Yuma. 7 out of 8 prakim are not about the fast of Yom Kippur. They are about the Avodah and the Beis HaMikdash. Like one could even ask, why is Maseches Yuma even in Seder Moed in terms of the context? It ought to be in Seder Kachim. It's all about the Korbanos. Now, based on the Mishnayos in Maseches Yuma, many Piyutim, poetic renditions, were made going through the steps of the Avodah. Some of these renditions may be as old as the time of the Gemara itself. I'll go over that in a second. Most of them are from the Middle Ages. And it's interesting that there are different poems. The poems are different. The structure is more or less the same, but they do take different halachic positions. So a certain piyut might follow Rashi's Shita. A certain piyut might follow the Rambam Shita. A certain piyut might follow Ramban Shita. So Lamdanim like to compare the Sidrei Avodah and say, this is like Rashi, and this is like Taisus. It becomes like part of Limud HaTorah. Now, Lamaisa, there are over 50 different Sidrei Avodah. 50 different ones. But the ones you will encounter in your life, in all likelihood, are only 2. One is the standard Ashkenazic one, that'll be in the Ashkenazic Art Scroll Machzor. The other will be for Sephardim and for Hasidim. So the Ashkenazic one, the regular Ashkenazic one, is a poem that begins with the words Amitz Koach, and the author of that poem was a very, very famous Paitan, Rav Meshulam ben Klunimus, and his name is spelled out in an acrostic. The Sephardic Hasidic one begins with the words Atah Konanta, you established the world. Now it's very, very fascinating. Meshulam ben Klunimus, who wrote Amitz Koach, he lived in the 1000s, a little before Rashi. In fact, Rashi sometimes refers to a little before Rashi. The author of Atah Konanta, this is very fascinating, some say was a person who was known as Yossi ben Yossi Cohen Gadol. Now he's a little bit of an enigmatic figure, but some say Yossi ben Yossi Cohen Gadol was actually a Cohen Gadol in the time of the Bayit Sheni, who actually did the Avodah, which of course would give Atah Konanta a tremendous amount of authority. Others say, I don't want to get too scholarly, that there actually is another Atah Konanta, which is not the one in the Sephardic Machzor, and the other Atah Konanta, which we don't even say, was written by Yossi ben Yossi, and the Atah Konanta we have is later, and the printers confused Atah Konanta 1 with Atah Konanta 2. Be it as it may, these are 2 different piyutim of the Seder Avodah. It is interesting, and this will be a call out for Sephardim and Hasidim, that the poskim say Atah Konanta is halachically more accurate than Amitz Koach, and as a result, there are Ashkenazim who even in an Ashkenaz Machzor will say Atah Konanta in the Seder Avodah, or like the Chai Yodam simply makes corrections in Amitz Koach, keeping the nusach of Amitz Koach, so it'll fit with Atah Konanta. So if you're saying Atah Konanta, you're actually saying the Seder Avodah in a bit, again, I mean, it's 80% the same. I mean, I'm not suggesting total differences, but there are going to be some differences. Now, what's fascinating is that although we have these 2 Sidrei Avodah, and indeed we have 50 altogether of Sajjagon, all sorts of people wrote Sidrei Avodah, they all have the same style. They all have the same style. It's kind of, it reminds me of Google Earth, right? If you ever Google Earth, right? So you open up to Google Earth, so you get, I don't know, the solar system, then you get down to Earth, and then you get down to Eretz Yisrael, then you get down to Yerushalayim, then you get down, right? It gets narrower and narrower focus till you get to Ohr Somayach, 22 Shimon HaTzadik. All of the Piyutei Avodah begin the same way. They describe Hashem creating a universe. And out of that great universe, he chose Adam HaRishon to be the height of the world, the purpose of the world. And then from Adam HaRishon, eventually he narrowed it down to Avram. Then from Avram, he rejected Yishmael and narrowed it down to Yitzchak. And then from Yitzchak, he rejected Esav and he narrowed it down to Yaakov. In other words, starting with creation of the world in poetic ways, then narrowing it down. And then from Yaakov, he chose Levi to be the Shevet of those who do the divine service. And from Levi, he chose Aaron and the Cohen Gadol. And so you go from creation of the universe all the way to Cohen Gadol. So you haven't even started the Avodah yet. This is, and it's interesting. This is a universal feature. So whoever wrote the first Seder Avodah established a certain pattern that all of the poets follow in the Seder Avodah, in which the beginning is about the creation of the universe, narrowing it down to the Cohen Gadol. Okay. After this, we start the Seder Avodah. So, a few introductory points in order to understand the Seder Avodah well. Number one, all of the service on Yom Kippur is done by one man. It is done only by the Cohen Gadol. I don't only mean the Yom Kippur stuff is done by the Cohen Gadol, I even mean the daily stuff. There's a korban Tamid of the morning and a korban Tamid of the afternoon. These are not Yom Kippur korbanos. These are things you do every day. It's got to be done by the Cohen Gadol. Okay? Nobody else can do it. And if God forbid the Cohen Gadol dies, there is a Sagan, there is a vice Cohen Gadol who kind of steps in. Right? This is a Gezeras HaKosov that Yom Kippur, so it's a tough day for the Cohen Gadol. He does every single thing. Of course, I should also mention, the Mishnah says in Yuma, he did not sleep the night of Yom Kippur, lest he have a seminal emission. So he was up all night, and then he works all day. Number two, the second thing to know is, and obviously I'm not going to be able to go over every detail, is the Cohen Gadol has two uniforms. And on Yom Kippur, he moves back and forth between them. The uniform that he wears during the year that has the breastplate, the choshen, and the like, and there's a lot of gold thread, that is called Bigdei Zahav, the golden garments. 8 golden garments. On Yom Kippur, he has a special pure white linen, which are called Bigdei Lavan. So what we're going to see on Yom Kippur is he goes back and forth between Bigdei Lavan, Bigdei Zahav, Bigdei Lavan. In fact, he goes back and forth 5 times. Bigdei Zahav, Act 1, play in 5 acts. Bigdei Lavan, Act 2, Bigdei Zahav, Act 3, Bigdei Lavan, Act 4, Bigdei Zahav, Act 5, Yom Kippur is over. Which means in the course of Yom Kippur, he puts on Bigdei Zahav 3 times, he puts on Bigdei Lavan 2 times. Okay? And basically, as a general rule, we're going to see some exceptions, when he's doing the Avodas that are not connected to Yom Kippur, like the korban Tamid, he wears the Bigdei Zahav. When he does the special Yom Kippur service, he wears the Bigdei Lavan. That's kind of the general rule of thumb that we're going to apply. And the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah explains, why does the Cohen Gadol not wear golden garments when he goes into the Kodesh HaKodashim and does the Yom Kippur service? Because gold is a reminder of the Chet HaEgel. And when the Cohen Gadol comes in to plead for mercy, Ein Kategor Nase Sanegor, the prosecutor does not become the defense attorney. Now, of course, Hashem is aware of the Chet HaEgel, we're not reminding him of anything he doesn't already know. but there's a certain arrogance and chutzpah to waive your sin when you're asking God for mercy. Remember, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says this is also the reason why we don't blow a shofar with a cow's horn or a bull's horn, because once again, we're asking for mercy. Ein kategor, the prosecutor, cannot be the attorney. Now, to this day, this is why there is a minhag. It's not a din, but it's an old minhag, that number one, you wear white on Yom Kippur. So the married men wear kittles, even women will often wear white dresses, etc. If you're single, wear a white shirt, at least, and the like. And part of that is to be like the Cohen Gadol. And there is an old minhag too, not to wear gold jewelry on Yom Kippur. Some say only yellow gold, they allow white gold, whatever it would be, but it's based on ein kategor, nasa senegar. Now it's a minhag, because the halacha that you don't wear gold is only the Cohen Gadol in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Okay, so we have the Cohen Gadol, we have the 5 changes of garments, gold, white, gold, white, gold. And I should also mention, I'm going to bring in some other things, but the Cohen Gadol has to be tovel in a mikveh before each change. So he's tovel before he puts on the gold. He's tovel before he puts on the white. He's tovel before he puts on the gold. Tovel before he puts on the white. Tovel before he puts on the gold. When he takes off the gold and puts on his street clothes, he doesn't have to be tovel. That's the end of it. So it turns out that the Cohen Gadol goes to the mikveh 5 times. The mikveh there are a number of mikvahs in the temple complex itself, and he's tovel. And although on Yom Kippur, generally speaking, you're not allowed to wash, you're not allowed to even, other than the mitzvah Netilas Yadayim, up to the fingers, up to the knuckles, you're not allowed to even dip your finger in water. But this is a mitzvah, part of the halacha. I mean, just like on Yom Kippur, you're shechting and burning. I mean, you're doing all sorts of malachos. So when it's chiyuv, when it's part of the Avoidah of Yom Kippur, to go to the mikveh, so the Cohen Gadol goes to the mikveh. Yeah.
Do we know how many times he dipped each time he went?
So as far as the Mishnah is concerned, it's only once. I mean, there was no, what he did al pi Kabbalah. First of all, on Yom Kippur, it's an interesting point. Even if you're normally tovel many times, it's not so pashut on Yom Kippur you could be tovel many times. Meaning, the Kohen, because there is an issur of rechitza, it's nitcha, it's pushed aside because of the chiyuv to be tovel. So any tefillah beyond the obligation might in fact be prohibited, even if normally you would be tovel more times. Okay, we're also going to talk about the fact that he washed his hands and feet 10 times. I'll get to that. That's a little hard to explain without knowing the cycle. But 5 changes of clothing, going to the mikveh 5 times. Okay, yeah.
Why was he going to the mikveh? He became tamid?
No, not because he becomes tamid. It's even if he's bedafka, not tamid, he goes to the mikveh as a way of purification, consecration, dedication to the new service he's going to be providing. Okay? Now, let me share with you a very interesting kasha that Rav Zalman Sorotzkin asks. He was one of the Gedolim pre-World War II, and he lived after World War II as well. He says like this. He says, well, wait a second here. On one hand, we say that the Cohen Gadol should not wear gold on Yom Kippur because of Ein Kategar Nasa Senegar. On the other hand, a lot of Yom Kippur he is wearing gold. And meaning, if we're concerned that Yom Kippur is a day of forgiveness, we ought to say that he shouldn't wear any gold at all. And yet, 3 times out of the 5, he's wearing big days off. Why isn't there a problem of Ein Kategar Nasa Senegar? So Rav Zalman Sorotzkin says a beautiful thing. There's a big nafkamina between the Cohen Gadol entering the Kodesh HaKadoshim and when the Cohen Gadol is not in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. When the Cohen Gadol enters the Kodesh HaKadoshim, nobody is there. Nobody is there. It's just between him and God. When it's between him and God, he should not bring up the sins of Klal Yisrael. He should only seek mercy, compassion, forgiveness. Don't bring in Averos when you go to God and you seek mercy. But when the Cohen Gadol is not in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, people are seeing him. A lot of the Cohen Gadol stuff on Yom Kippur that was not in the Kodesh HaKodashim, there were big crowds there. When there's big crowds, maybe they ought to see the gold. Maybe they ought to remember the Avodah. It shouldn't just be, I'm okay, you're okay, everybody's wonderful. Let's remember the Chedo Egel and other Averas. So Memela, he says, when he will be seen by other people, then it is appropriate that we have some reminder that we have done Averos in the past. That's Ma'oreras Teshuva. When it's just with God, no other. Now they say a similar story about the Satmar Rebbe. Somebody once said to the Satmar Rebbe, a bit of a chutzpah, he said, you're so critical about everybody, even from people. Avoda is treif, and this yeshiva is treif, etc. I mean, Avraham Avinu even prayed for Sodom, the Sodomites, the worst people in the world. Are you telling me a from Yid in Agudas Yisrael who supports the state of Israel is worse than Sodom and Amorah? Avraham Avinu saw the good in Sodom and Amorah, and you can't see the good in a from Shomer Shabbos Yid who learns Torah. So the Satmar Rebbe said, Avraham Avinu was talking to God. When you talk to God, you only want to see the good of the Jewish people. Don't bring up bad things. But I have a chiyuv, the Satmar Rebbe says, to give musar, to give tochacha. And if based on my shittas, I feel that a certain mahalach is wrong, I gotta tell people. I'm not endorsing it one way or the other, but this is what he said. So he said, and then he said, and how do you know what I say to Hashem when I'm davening alone? Also praise for everybody, even the people that he would disagree with. Avram prays for Saddam. The Satmar Rebbe said, I pray also for the Rishayim of Am Yisrael, but I still have a chiyuv to give Musar and Tochach. Okay, it's very similar to Rav Zalman Sorotskin's thought. Yeah.
Might be a little off topic a bit, but
Yeah.
we don't have the Avoda today. We always make that. Why don't they still do the goat as Azazel?
Yeah, well, the answer is that I'll get to it, but the goat Azazel, although it's not technically sacrificed in the Beis HaMikdash, is part of the service of the Beis HaMikdash. So when there's no Beis HaMikdash, we do not have the goat Azazel either, because it is connected. In fact, the designation of the goats has to be in the Azara, the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash. Yeah.
Why doesn't the Cohen Gadol himself, when he's going into the Kodesh HaKodashim, he himself doesn't need to also be reminded of the Chet Egel?
Well, yeah, I mean, I hear the point, but of course, keep in mind that he's wearing his golden garments 3 times during the day, so that's a good enough reminder. When he goes into the Kodesh HaKodashim, even if he's giving up his reminder, he's doing it so there shouldn't be a reminder for the people. So in a sense, you can almost say he's sacrificing what might be better for him in order not to be a makatreg, not to be a prosecutor or an accuser against Bnei Yisrael.
Is it not to say that Hashem forgives but doesn't forget?
Yeah, I think that's very, very clear. We say it in davening in Rosh Hashanah, Ein shichacha lifnei kisei kavodecha. There is no forgetting. There is no possible way Hashem forgets. But I would say, behaviorally and operationally, he may be, as he accepts our tshuva, he will behave as if he doesn't remember. So it's not going to make a practical difference in that way. Now, I'm not sure how to describe that. I mean, would that mean Hashem wills himself to forget? I'm not sure if we would actually say that, but at least he wills himself not to act on the basis of that memory. Okay. All right, so step number 1 is, and again, all of this is in the Mishnah, but the poetic compositions either simplify or they add details from the Gemara. They do both things. They both simplify and they add some detail. Is that for a whole week before Yom Kippur, the Cohen Gadol is sequestered in the area of the Beis HaMikdash, without his wife, without his children. He is quarantined there. And the purpose of that quarantine, again, there was a special chamber for him, was that he should spiritually prepare himself for the holiness of the day, as well as practice. There were Kohanim and Sanhedrin that would teach him or review various aspects of the service. And for an entire week, he was in the confines of the, not the mikdash proper, but the courtyards or different areas of the mikdash. He was not allowed to leave for any reason at all. Okay. Then we come to Yom Kippur night. As I mentioned, Yom Kippur night, he was not allowed to sleep because the fear of a seminal emission, a wet dream or something, in which case he could not do the Avoda. That was a big deal. So they had to keep him awake. So what does a person do if he's awake all night? So the Mishnah says, if he knows how to learn, he learns. If he didn't know how to learn, because unfortunately during the Bayis Sheni, many Kohanim Gadolim were not always righteous, were not always learned. Some of them were Sadducees. The Romans would sometimes auction off the position to the highest bidder. So if the person didn't know how to learn, we read things to him. And it mentions things that were interesting stories, not John Grisham novel, but from Daniel, or interesting prophetic visions that would keep him awake. And the little kids had the pleasure, the rare once-a-year pleasure, that if he was falling asleep, they could snap their fingers on his cheek to keep him awake. Yeah.
If Cohen Gadol and the Sadducees, would they have to not say anything from the oral Torah? How would that work?
Say what?
Would they have to not say anything from Torah Shabbat?
Well, it doesn't mention that they did, but I don't think they would give deference to a Sadducee by but it is interesting. I'll mention a very interesting catch-22 here. It does mention that the morning of Erev Yom Kippur, Beis Aptinas, they were a special family of Kohanim that were experts in making the incense. And we know Ketairis, and we know on Yom Kippur the Cohen Gadol brings special Ketairis into the Kodesh HaKodashim. Now it's interesting that the Tzedukim had a different shita of how to burn the incense on Yom Kippur. We paskin that the Cohen Gadol walks in with the coals in one hand, in one container, the incense is another container, and he puts the incense on the coals in the Kodesh HaKodashim. That's how we paskin. The Tzedukim took the position that you must enter the Kodesh HaKodashim with burning incense already. In other words, they would put the incense on the coals before the Cohen Gadol entered the Kodesh HaKodashim. Now, lahalacha, if you did it their way, it's not valid. So it mentions that every Erev Yom Kippur, they would make the Cohen Gadol make a shavua, that he will follow the rule of first bringing it in and then burning it in the Kodesh HaKodashim, and he will not be Mishana. And the reason why this had to be necessary is because nobody was in other words, not only was nobody in the Kodesh HaKodashim, but nobody was in the whole Heichal, or the whole Mishkan, when the Cohen Gadol went in, so nobody would see if he did like it's Stuki or not. So we had to make a Shavua, and it's recorded, both in the Mishnah and in the poems, that the Cohen Gadol, if he was not at Stuki, would cry that they were suspecting him of being at Stuki, and the Sanhedrin would cry that they had to be concerned for this. But now, let me ask you a good question. The whole purpose of this Shavua is only if you're at Stuki. If you're not at Stuki, you didn't have to make a Shavua. Now, if you're at Stuki, and you considered the halacha to be that you got to put the ketairos on the coals before you enter, when you make a Shavua that you're not going to do it that way, l'shitascha, which is incorrect, you're making a Shavua to violate the Torah. Now, a Shavua to violate the Torah is null and void. If I make a Shavua, I'm going to eat treif. Right? So it's not a Shavua. It's not a Shavua. So how does this even work? In other words, the Chachamim want to be sure that if he's at Stuki, he's going to follow the rule, right? So they make him swear. But if he's at Stuki, his Shavua is not going to be binding on him, so he's still free to do what he wants to do.
Maybe the Stuki don't believe that.
Yeah. So, right. So the answer would be the very rule that a Shavua is not effective against the Torah is part of Torah Shabbal Peh. It's not beferish of the Torah Shabbat. The Tzdukim took the position, the erroneous position, that Shavuos literally are always valid no matter what. So Mamela, if you're at Tzduki, the Shavua is going to restrain you, even though al pi halacha, such a Shavua theoretically would not. Right? It's an interesting question that the Chachamim are utilizing the mistakes of the Tzdukim to try to get them to move in the right direction. Okay, so that's all right. So then we have the night of Yom Kippur. The Cohen Gadol was up all night. Midnight already. Now again, they can't bring korbanos until dawn, but midnight there was one Avoida that the Cohen Gadol was able to do, and this was starting from midnight. This was Trumas Hadeshin, which again is a daily Avoda, and that is every morning, but it could be even from midnight, but normally it would be in the morning, but Yom Kippur, because of so many things, they moved it early. A shovel full of ashes is taken from the top of the Mizbeach and put on the side of the Mizbeach, Trumas Hadeshin, the separating of the ashes, and then they would also arrange. It's not just that took 2 minutes, but then they would arrange all the wood on the altar for the day. Normally they would wait until the morning to do that, but because Yom Kippur there are so many things, so they did the Seder Ma'aracha, the arrangement of all the woods, which, by the way, that's one thing the Cohen Gadol didn't have to do, meaning he didn't have to schlep all the wood. That other Kohanim could do. So he did the Trumas Hadeshin, and then other Kohanim did Sidor Ma'aracha, putting new wood on the Mizbeach and the like. Okay. We now come to the morning, though. Once it's the morning, so once again, the Cohen Gadol goes to the mikveh. He puts on his golden garments. Actually, I should have said he had to do Trumas Hadeshin in that. So actually, the first time he went to the mikveh was midnight, put on his golden garments. Okay, mikveh, golden garments. And Act 1 is essentially the Korban Tamid of the morning. Again, I can't go over every detail because that itself has many, many details. There's a whole Maseches of the Mishnah, actually Gemara, Maseches Tamid, that goes over this. But remember, every single day of the year, there is a lamb that is brought as an olah, burnt offering in the morning, and there'll be one in the afternoon as well. So essentially, what is brought in the morning, Act 1, Big Day Zahav, the slaughtering of the Tamid, the sprinkling of the blood on the Mizbeach, the burning of the lamb pieces on the Mizbeach. There is also the incense of the morning, which is not the Kodesh HaKodashim, but that's the incense on the inner Mizbeach, Ketores. And there is preparation of the 7 lamps of the menorah. Now, the menorah is not going to be lit till the afternoon. That's called Hadlakas Haneros. But in the morning, and this is every day, this is nothing to do with Yom Kippur yet. In the morning, there is Hatavas Haneros. Hatavas Haneros basically means new oil is poured into the 7 lamps and new wicks are poured in. So you're preparing the lamps, and without getting too complicated, technically you did 5 and then you did 2, and there was either Ketores in the middle or something in the middle. But essentially, again, because it's hard to keep all the details in mind, so when you think about Act 1 in Big Day Zahav, we have the Korban Tamid of the morning, we have the Ketores of the morning on the golden Mizbeach, and we have Hatavas, not Hadlakas, Hatavas Neros of the menorah, which is new oil and new wicks. But remember, the menorah is not lit yet. The menorah will not be lit till late afternoon. This is Act 1. Act 1 had no aspect of the Yom Kippur Avodah at all, although we'll see that there is a nafkamina according to Atar Konanta. Act 1 there were some musafim of Yom Kippur that were brought that don't involve the Kodesh HaKodashim. There was a bull for Yom Kippur. There was 7 kavasim. According to Atakonanta, those musafim were brought in Act 1. According to Amitz Koach, the Ashkenazic nusach, there were no musafim that were brought in Act 1. Now remember, when the korban tamid is brought, you also bring a meal offering that's burnt and a wine libation. Right? So there's a mincha and there's nisach hayayin. Okay, that is Act 1. After Act 1, takes off the big day zahav, goes to the mikvah, puts on the special linen garments. Act 2 is the longest act. That is the main aspect of the service of Yom Kippur. So Mirza Hashem, hopefully we'll go over that tomorrow. Okay, have a good day.
Thank you for listening to this Ohr Somayach production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.